The vanishing message, a mysterious user's night. It was a night like any other in the sprawling, sleepless metropolis and urban jungle where digital whispers merged with ancient shadows. Evan Carter, a freelance writer with a penchant for the macabre, found himself glued to his computer screen in a cramped apartment lit only by the eerie glow of neon signs and his aging monitor. Scrolling through Midnight Echo, an obscure online forum dedicated to unexplained phenomena and urban legends, he encountered a mysterious thread posted by a user simply known as User 404. The post offered no title or introduction, only a single, chilling sentence: "The night conceals what you dare not seek. Read at your peril." In an instant, before his eyes could fully register its meaning, the message vanished, erased as if it had never been there, leaving behind a void filled with uneasy silence. A few moments later, his phone vibrated with an incoming text: "You have been marked." The terse warning sent a shudder down his spine, and as the clock inched closer to midnight, the temperature in his apartment seemed to drop, the air thick with foreboding. Compelled by a mix of dread and irresistible curiosity, Evan left his apartment for a walk through the dimly lit streets, hoping to dispel the sense of impending doom. The city, usually vibrant even at night, appeared distorted, its familiar corners twisted into shadowy silhouettes, as if the night itself was trying to warn him of something unseen. Upon his return, the unsettling feeling deepened. His apartment now felt alien, the flickering lights, the soft hum of his computer, and the sudden, inexplicable static that seemed to fill every corner. When he booted up his computer once more, a new message from User 404 greeted him on the screen: "Curiosity is a dangerous companion. The night listens." At that moment, in the reflective darkness of his monitor, a ghostly figure flashed behind him, a pale, tormented visage with eyes that seemed to speak of long-forgotten secrets. Evan whirled around, but the room was empty save for the oppressive silence and the rhythmic ticking of an old wall clock. Desperate for answers, Evan dove deep into the labyrinth of the internet, piecing together fragmented rumors of a rogue hacker who had vanished mysteriously after exposing powerful corruption. His research unearthed a tale of a once idealistic rebel, whose digital legacy was forever bound to the enigmatic moniker of User 404. The hacker's final act, driven by an overwhelming need for justice, was said to have imprinted a curse into the very code of the web, a curse that now reached out to ensnare those who dared to question it. In a dimly lit cafe, over bitter coffee and whispered conversations, Evan met Lena, a cybersecurity expert with a shadowed past and an unusual sensitivity to the supernatural. Lena explained in hushed tones that sometimes the glitches in our digital world are not mere accidents but echoes of souls lost in the tumult of modernity, trapped between the tangible and the virtual, yearning to be free. That fateful night, as midnight's cloak descended upon the city, the boundaries between the digital and the real began to blur. Evan's computer screen danced with erratic symbols, and messages flowed with a haunting urgency: "The veil is thinning. You invited me in." The very fabric of his apartment vibrated with an otherworldly energy. A cold gust of wind snaked through closed windows and the flickering lights battled an unseen force. With every keystroke, every desperate search for understanding, the digital specter drew nearer, its presence palpable and its message undeniable. In a final act of defiance and desperate hope, Evan set up a makeshift altar of vintage electronics and modern devices, a blend of old-world mysticism and cutting-edge technology. Guided by obscure instructions found on forgotten web pages, he initiated a ritual meant to sever the tether between the restless soul and the digital realm. As he typed the final sequence of characters into his keyboard, the room plunged into a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the very essence of time. The screen erupted in a dazzling array of light and shadow, and for a moment, the ghostly figure materialized fully, a spectral face etched with anguish, its eyes holding the sorrow of 1,000 lost moments. In a voice that resonated like a whisper from the abyss, the apparition spoke: "I am the echo of a past injustice, the remnant of a soul betrayed by the digital revolution. I was User 404, and I never meant for it to end this way." The confession, a lament of betrayal and longing, filled the room with a mix of grief and terror. With the final press of the enter key, the spectral presence began to fade, its anguished eyes locking with Evan's one last time as a final message flashed across the screen: "Thank you for setting me free, but remember, freedom always comes at a price." In the aftermath, as dawn crept through the window and the remnants of digital chaos subsided, Evan sat in a profound silence, forever altered by the night's events. His apartment, though appearing unchanged, held an indelible mark, a lingering echo of a soul once trapped within the digital void. The forum Midnight Echo resumed its ordinary murmur of mundane mysteries, yet beneath its surface, the ghost of user 404 remained, a reminder that in our hyper-connected world, some secrets are never truly laid to rest. And as Evan continued his journey into the realm of the unknown, he carried with him the memory of a night when the boundary between code and spirit dissolved into a singular, haunting truth. Shadows on Snap Map. In the dead of night, while the city slumbered, I found myself drawn to the soft glow of my phone. It was an ordinary evening until a solitary, ghostly shadow appeared on my Snap Map. Unlike the familiar icons of my friends, this shadow lingered on the fringes of the digital world, silent and unnervingly still. At first, I chalked it up to a glitch, an errant pixel in an otherwise flawless system. But as the hours passed and the shadow remained fixed in its place, a chill crept over me. Curiosity quickly gave way to obsession. Every night thereafter, I watched as the shadow drifted to desolate corners of the city, abandoned warehouses, forgotten alleyways, and the outskirts of crumbling parks. It was as if the apparition was following an unseen script, moving with deliberate intent. Unable to ignore the pull of this mystery, I began to trace its steps, venturing out into the night armed with nothing but my phone and a growing sense of dread. One foggy evening, I arrived at an old, decrepit building rumored to be the heart of local urban legends. The structure, long abandoned and worn by time, stood as a testament to forgotten histories. The shadow was there, more vivid and unnerving than ever, cast against a backdrop of peeling paint and broken windows. With a pounding heart, I crossed the threshold, each step echoing in the silence of a place that time had seemingly forsaken. Inside, I discovered remnants of a once thriving community, faded photographs, handwritten notes, and walls that whispered stories of joy and sorrow in equal measure. As I pieced together these fragments of the past, a haunting narrative began to emerge. Decades ago, a series of mysterious disappearances had plagued this very place. Rumors spoke of corruption, betrayal, and a tragedy so profound that it had been buried beneath layers of denial and time. The shadow on my Snap Map, I realized, was no digital anomaly. It was the lingering presence of a spirit trapped between eras, yearning for acknowledgement and release. That night, as I lay awake in my dimly lit room, the shadow invaded my dreams. In the darkness, it materialized with mournful eyes and an expression of profound loss, silently pleading for its story to be heard. When my phone buzzed with a chilling message, "I see you," I knew I was no longer dealing with a mere glitch. This was a call to action from a soul long ignored. Driven by a need to understand, I delved into local archives and interviewed the few remaining witnesses who still whispered of the past. I learned that the building had once been a vibrant center of life, a place where secrets were shared, promises made. But when tragedy struck, the very foundations of trust were shattered, leaving behind a legacy of pain and regret. The spirit that haunted my Snap Map was a remnant of that despair, a silent witness to injustice that had festered in the shadows of society. Determined to bring some measure of peace to this restless soul, I returned to the abandoned building for one final confrontation. Amidst the decay and the echoes of lost voices, I spoke softly into the oppressive silence, inviting the spirit to share its burden. The temperature dropped abruptly, and in the flicker of my phone's light, I sensed a presence drawing near, a gentle touch, like a sorrowful caress, brushing past me. In that moment, I understood, the shadow was not out to harm me but was a remnant of a deep, unresolved grief, seeking the closure that had eluded it for so long. With the evidence I painstakingly gathered, I organized a small memorial for the forgotten souls of the building. Neighbors, skeptics, and curious friends gathered under a starless sky as I recounted the story of loss, betrayal, and unhealed wounds. As we stood in silent tribute, a palpable shift seemed to ripple through the air, as if the collective act of remembrance was loosening the bonds that tethered the spirit to its digital prison. In the days that followed, I noticed a subtle change on my Snap Map. The ominous shadow, once a constant reminder of a dark past, began to fade, replaced by the familiar, comforting markers of everyday life. Though the haunting presence had receded, the memory of that encounter, of the digital specter that bridged the gap between technology and timeless sorrow, remained etched in my mind. Shadows on Snap Map was more than just a creepy glitch on a smartphone screen. It was a portal into the unspoken histories that linger beneath our modern lives. It reminded me that behind every digital footprint, there is a human story, a tale of love, loss, and the enduring quest for redemption. And sometimes, it only takes one person willing to listen to set the past free. Behind the eyes, an unknown stalker. It began on a rainy autumn night when the world blurred into a watercolor of shadows and whispered secrets. I had just moved into an old townhouse on the outskirts of the city, a relic of forgotten times with creaking floors and a history that seeped from every corner. Little did I know, that night would mark the beginning of an unimaginable terror that would forever change the way I saw myself and the world around me. While unpacking in the dim glow of a single lamp, I noticed a fleeting shape at the periphery of my vision. In the mirror hanging in the narrow corridor, a pair of eyes seemed to flicker, silent, watchful, and disturbingly familiar. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a remnant of my exhaustion after a long day of moving. Yet, as the nights grew longer and the shadows deepened, those eyes returned. They watched from darkened windows, hidden corners, and sometimes, I swore, from behind my own reflection. Sleep became elusive. Every night, I lay awake listening to the steady drip of rain against the window, feeling as though the house itself was holding its breath. A persistent sense of being observed gnawed at me, and I began to wonder if I was losing my mind or if something far more sinister was at play. It wasn't long before I discovered other inexplicable signs of intrusion. Strange symbols appeared on fogged-up mirrors, and cryptic messages were etched into the wooden banister, markings that I couldn't decipher but that stirred a primal fear within me. At first, I thought these were the work of an overactive imagination or the mischief of a local prankster. However, the careful strokes of an unfamiliar script and the deliberate placement of each mark hinted at something far more calculated. One stormy night, while I sat huddled on my couch, the lights suddenly flickered and died. In that suffocating darkness, I heard soft, deliberate footsteps pacing the hall. I called out, my voice cracking with terror, but only silence answered. In the intermittent bursts of emergency light, I caught sight of a tall, indistinct silhouette moving with an unnerving grace. Although its face remained shrouded in darkness, those eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, seemed to pierce through the gloom, leaving me with a chill that reached into the deepest recesses of my soul. As days turned into nights, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. I began to document every unsettling detail in a journal filled with anxious sketches and cryptic notes. I awoke from dreams of endless corridors and dark figures whispering secrets in an unknown language, only to find the same haunting presence lingering in the corners of my waking hours. Friends tried to comfort me, attributing my experiences to stress and isolation, but my investigation into the townhouse's past revealed a series of unsolved disappearances and mysterious deaths that had once plagued the building. Whispers of an unknown stalker or relentless shadow preying on the vulnerable echoed through old newspapers and local lore, as if the very walls of my new home were steeped in a legacy of fear. Determined to reclaim my sanity, I delved into the building's history. Late nights spent in the musty archives of the local library unearthed faded photographs of previous residents, many of whom bore haunted expressions and eyes that seemed too aware for their time. Among these relics, one name recurred, Jonathan Gray, a charming yet troubled man whose disappearance had never been resolved. His portrait, with penetrating eyes and a melancholic smile, sent shivers down my spine. Could it be that Jonathan Gray was connected to the spectral figure that now tormented me? I pored over old diaries and letters, piecing together fragmented stories of the lost souls who had once called this place home. Their words spoke of a presence that lurked in the periphery, watching and waiting for a moment of vulnerability, a presence not bound by time or flesh. One evening, driven by a mixture of dread and an insatiable need for answers, I followed a trail of cryptic clues to the attic, a space I had long avoided. The attic was a veritable time capsule, filled with relics of bygone eras, faded photographs, antique furniture, and dusty records whispering tales of sorrow and loss. In a forgotten trunk, I uncovered a bundle of letters tied with a fraying ribbon. Addressed to Jonathan Gray, the letters chronicled a passionate, tumultuous relationship with a mysterious woman whose identity was shrouded in secrecy. Their correspondence hinted at a forbidden secret and spoke of an ancient ritual or curse that had bound Jonathan to the house and, perhaps, to the unseen force stalking me. As I read, an icy hand seemed to brush against my neck. I spun around in terror, only to be met by the oppressive darkness, and the feeling of being watched intensified. In the following days, the manifestations escalated. I began to see fleeting images of a gaunt, pallid figure in every reflective surface, a figure with sorrowful eyes that glowed with an unearthly light. It was as if the entity was trying to communicate, to reveal a truth hidden beneath layers of fear and regret. One night, compelled by a strange force, I followed faint footprints that appeared on the polished hardwood floor. They led me to the basement, a place I had long avoided because of its oppressive aura. With trembling hands and a racing heart, I descended the creaking stairs into a dim, forgotten space illuminated only by a feeble beam of moonlight. In the center of the room stood an old, ornate mirror, its surface marred by cracks and the passage of time. As I approached, the mirror's reflection shifted. I saw not only my own frightened face, but also the unmistakable presence of the unknown stalker lurking behind my eyes. In that moment, the truth crashed over me like a tidal wave. The eyes, ever-present and relentlessly haunting, were not merely an external force, but a mirror reflecting my own buried guilt and unspoken regrets. The letters, the history, and the stalking figure all pointed to a terrible revelation. Jonathan Gray's fate was intertwined with mine. In his desperate search for absolution, he had unwittingly invoked a curse, binding his tortured soul to this place. And now, in a twisted irony, I had become the vessel for his eternal torment. As I grappled with this horrifying truth, the entity in the mirror began to communicate not with words, but with fragmented memories and overwhelming sensations. I was inundated with visions of a tragic past, a man driven to madness by loss, a forbidden love that spiraled into obsession, and a desperate pact with forces beyond human comprehension. Jonathan had sought to cheat death by binding his soul to the realm of the living, but in doing so, he had unleashed a relentless spirit that thrived on fear and suffering. In a final, desperate bid to break the cycle, I gathered every scrap of courage and retraced my steps back to the attic, where answers lay hidden among relics of a forgotten past. There, I discovered a leather-bound journal belonging to Jonathan, a chronicle of his descent into despair, his desperate attempts to rid himself of the curse, and his anguished confession: he had become the stalker, the silent observer behind every pair of eyes, doomed to wander the corridors of his own regrets. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I prepared to confront the entity that had haunted me for so long. I set up a small ritual in the center of my living room. Candles were lit, salt was carefully sprinkled in a deliberate pattern, and I recited incantations that trembled on the edge of my understanding. The atmosphere thickened, as if the very air were charged with malevolent intent. The eyes in the mirror burned brighter, and the figure stepped fully into view, a gaunt, sorrowful visage with a twisted smile that betrayed centuries of agony. The confrontation was surreal and excruciating. My sanity teetered on a knife's edge as I faced the specter of a man consumed by despair. In a battle of wills, memories and emotions clashed like thunder in the quiet room. The entity's voice, a cacophony of regret and longing, demanded recognition for the sins of the past. It was not merely an attack on my life, but an assault on my very soul, a reckoning for hidden transgressions I had long avoided. In that final, desperate moment, I understood that the curse could only be broken through forgiveness, both of oneself and of the long dead. With trembling lips, I offered an apology to the tormented spirit, acknowledging the shared pain that had bound us together. As my words echoed through the room, the candles flickered violently, and the mirror's surface shimmered with an unearthly glow. Slowly, as if exhaling a long-held sorrow, the entity's cold, accusatory eyes softened and its form began to dissipate into the ether. In the days that followed, the oppressive presence that had haunted every step gradually faded into the recesses of memory. The strange markings and cryptic messages vanished as if they had never existed, leaving behind only the lingering echo of a tragedy long past. Yet, the lessons learned during that harrowing ordeal remained etched into my soul. I had glimpsed the depths of human despair and the weight of unspoken guilt, a realization that the eyes we carry within us are not merely windows to the soul, but also keepers of our darkest secrets. Although Jonathan Gray's spirit had finally found peace, the memory of his torment and my own would forever remain etched behind my eyes. Now, whenever I catch a glimpse of my reflection, I see not only the scars of that ordeal but also a quiet resilience born from confronting the unknown. The shadows that once seemed malevolent have receded, replaced by a soft, forgiving light of understanding. And though the unknown stalker has faded into legend, the story of our intertwined fates serves as a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not those lurking in the darkness, but those that reside within us all.